afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. I am Michaela Ayan of Sony's Alpha Universe, and on behalf of the Sony team, I am thrilled to welcome you to our very first What's in My Bag live event. You may be one of the readers on Alpha Universe who are really keen on our What's in My Bag features on the site, and by popular demand, we've decided to take it to the next level and bring them to you live. We're going to have popular creators over the next few weeks who are going to walk us through their bounty of gear and talk to us about how they use it, and most importantly, answer any and all questions that you may have. Before we talk about our first creator guest today, I'd like to bring on my partner in Alpha Universe, Christopher Robinson.
Hello, it's great to be here. Welcome.
Great to see you as well, Chris. You are the originator of the What's in My Bag feature on Alpha Universe. You've done dozens of them so far. This is kind of exciting that we get to do them live.
Yeah, this is really fantastic, and I certainly don't take the credit for inventing What's in My Bag, but we've certainly organized a lot of them on alphauniverse.com, and they've been incredibly popular, and for good reason. They really give people a great insight into what is in top photographers, filmmakers, vloggers, other creators' bags.
Yes, for sure. And our first guest today is very cool, is very popular. He's a YouTube creator with a huge following because he does these amazing videos on all sorts of gears and how he uses it. And we're going to get to see some of it today. I'm talking about none other than Pierre Lambert. You've had an opportunity to work with Pierre.
I have. Pierre has been great to work with. He's a great creator. And he's a photographer and a vlogger. He travels the world creating great imagery for his clients and for all of his channels. And in doing that, he's really curated a tremendous collection of gear. And it's been very thoughtfully, acquired over time for specific purposes. And he's going to walk us through the bag.
There you go. Hi. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Pierre is with us, actually.
Hey guys.
What happens when you're doing something for the first time? Hey, Pierre.
Thanks for having me, guys. How are you doing today?
Great.
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be great.
We're really excited to have you. And I see that you've prepared your bag. You have it on and you're ready to show us what's in it. So we're not going to delay it any further. I just want to make a couple of notes about how we're going to do the show today. We're going to have a first part where Pierre is going to be on the screen showing us his bag, showing us all his gear. It's going to be very exciting. Chris and I are going to ask him questions. So please put your questions into the chat if you're watching this on YouTube Live, or under the question mark if you're watching this on alphauniverse.com. And we will be asking Pierre all those questions. In the second part today, we are going to talk to Pierre about his work in the field and go a little bit more in depth into a couple of the lenses that he uses so we can hear firsthand what he thinks about it and how he thinks about it. And in the final part of today's event, we are going to ask him all questions, anything that you want to know. So please prepare your questions, put them in the chat, submit them on Alpha Universe, because this is your opportunity to hear directly from Pierre. So Pierre, without further ado, let's get started with your bag. Super curious, super excited to see what's in it.
Cool. Well, everyone watching, thank you for being here and welcome. Let us know where you're watching from in this world. I'm going to put the bag on the table. It's actually quite heavy today because I basically packed it as if I was going on a big trip, right? So I want to show you what I would take on a bigger trip, not just a day hike or just a day trip in the city. So in terms of backpack, I've been using the Atlas Athlete pack for years. Super happy with it. It's great, versatile. It's like a hiking backpack, but for cameras. So it actually feels great when you are carrying all day. The first thing to know is that I actually usually take my drone with me. And for that, I try to compartmentalize it because sometimes when you're on the field, you might not need it in every circumstances. So I just put it, I found a hack and I managed to fit it in a tripod bag, which is great. I just put it at the top of the bag. Then I'm going to have my laptop here and a bunch of cables. So I have a special pouch from Side by Side for cables and chargers and all that. But this is the least interesting part today. So I just wanted to get it out of the way and show you that I'm able to fit everything that I need right in there for, like, if you've seen the YouTube channels, like the trips to Japan, Polynesia, Tanzania, this is the bag I had. I actually had the black version, which was the V1. This is the V2 that just came out. Has a few updates, which are great. I like a little deeper pocket compartment. So where do I put the camera? Well, when it's not out there on my shoulders and I put it on one of those little clips, I actually have everything in here. And to be honest, because of what I do on YouTube, I usually have two cameras. One of them is either always out, which is the A7S III for filming the behind the scenes that you guys see. And the other one is getting ready to shoot stills, right? So the A7S III will be with someone helping me shoot video or will be with me. But when I'm going in the airplane, that might be a question you guys have, I actually have everything in here. And sometimes if I'm really heavy and I don't want them to check, I keep one camera in hand. And that's usually when I go through, and that backpack actually fits on the overhead compartments, which is super, super, super helpful. Now the backpack is divided in a few parts here, which are super important and versatile. I have the 7200 at the bottom of the backpack because it is currently one of the heaviest part of my gear. It's the heaviest lens, so I want to make sure that the weight is at the bottom and closer to my hips. I don't want it to be towards the top of my shoulder, otherwise it's going to pull me backwards. So everything that's heavy, I push it towards the bottom of the bag, and everything that's lighter is going to be higher. So 7200 f2.8, a lens I've loved and used in so many different circumstances. It's also the lens I will use when it's snowing, when it's raining, when it's like really heavy conditions, because I know that it can handle those elements. Now, if, for example, when I went to Japan, I didn't want to carry it. I didn't feel the need to carry it through 300 images because I had a heavy shutter. And most of the time also I'm on the 1635, which is very versatile. We can talk a little bit more later about it. And I might have an ND filter on it or not, depending on if I use it on the A7S III for the video or if I use it for the photography. Right now there is one on, so we'll just remove it. There we go. And what is important with that lens is that it's the lens that I will use when I don't know what I'm going to shoot, when I don't know the environment. This is a great lens for me to use. It goes everywhere. It's such an all-rounder. We'll talk about it later. And then a lens that I've come to really love, which at first I thought I didn't know how I would exactly use it. Outside of architectural shots and the city shots, I actually started loving that 14 millimeter f1.8, the GM one. It's really something that allows me to capture different kind of angles. We are very used to the same frames, 35 millimeter, 24 millimeter, and even the 1635 is a very known classic. 14 gives you that extra range, which can make it very interesting. Then I've got a 24 millimeter, and this is where it gets interesting. Depending on what I have, I might take the 14 millimeter, the 24 millimeter 1.4, or the 35 millimeter 1.4. It's going to be a call of judgment based on where I'm gonna go. Let's say I go more urban, I'll probably go for the 35 1.4. It's gonna be great for shooting at night, some street photography, those like little tight feels, but not too tight. The 24 is gonna be a little wider. But if I'm going more on an adventure, maybe outdoors, I'll take the 24 because it allows me to capture a little bit more of the environment. And 1.4, I mean, you can't go wrong at night if you're shooting at night with 1.4. And then we've got my latest favorite, which is the 50 millimeter f1.2. And it really hits between that long lens and that really short. 50 millimeter is something I would guess if you watched any video on YouTube, if you read any blog, is literally one lens that everyone wants at the beginning, right? It's something that we can get for cheap, the f1.8 version, and then maybe later down the line you want to upgrade to the 1.2, which I never thought I did until I tried it, honestly, and then I was like, wow, okay, I get it. So that's basically what I will take most of the time. I'm trying to it's almost like an oxymoron, but I'm trying to stay light and not take too much. I could add maybe 2 more lenses in it, but what I found out is that I get blocked when I'm on the field, and then I don't know what to use anymore. It's almost counterproductive. And if I were to ever change and had to be able to take only 2 lenses, I would probably just take a 70-200 and a 24-70 that I would rent out, for example, and not take the primes. But I love primes, and I'm always swearing by primes. There is just a specific look, feel, crispness, the colors that to those that I think is great. And also, it's a beautiful boundary to use for creativity, like not pulling out the zoom all the time allows you to move a little more and see things you might not have seen at first. So if you have any questions regarding those, let me know. That's what I use. Then we have, usually on the side here, I have a little pouch with my memory cards. In terms of memory cards, I've been using the new CF Express Type A on the A1 and the A7S3. And I also have the SD UHS2 that will go in there, because those were a little limited. They're basically a much higher budget than the SD. So I try to juggle, and whatever is important and needs a lot of reading data or writing data is going to go very fast on this one, and the SD card for stuff that I can shoot a little bit slower. And then last but not least, I'll put my tripod on the side here. I'm not a big tripod lover in life. I'm one of those, like, if I can find a pole or like a rock, I'd rather do that than having to carry my tripod. But I'll usually try to on specific trip. And then, last but not least, I have a little neck strap that I will put on the camera whenever needed. If I'm in a city, I don't know the environment, I don't want someone to grab the camera and run away, I'll try to pull that. That way they have to run away with me. It's, we can chase each other. So that's pretty much what I have on the bag. And honestly, sometimes staying lean is a little easier.
Very cool and very efficient. Well done, Pierre. Couple of questions. The first one is, was that the 16-35 GM that we saw?
Yes. So this is the 16-35 GM, the f2.8 version, which I think is an excellent lens. And I've never really had problems except when I threw it on the floor, but that's a different story. So.
Yes, it's not indestructible, as most things are not. But
no,
I think we're going to talk about that lens a little bit later too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely should.
Pierre,
okay, cool.
You carry a bunch of prime lenses, and it seems like just a couple of zoom lenses. How come you favor the primes over the zooms, or do you favor the primes over the zooms?
If I'm exploring, I'll favor the zoom, right? Because it will give me the ability to see what focal length will work better without having to access the bag all the time. If I'm actually knowing where I'm going, what I'm going to shoot, I would rather go for primes all the time. Or if I want to put myself in a little challenge, I might be in Guatemala, in Antigua, and I'm like, okay, I have an hour before dinner. I just want to have fun in the streets and go shoot. So I'll pop on the 24mm lens or 50mm lens, and I'll just walk around with those lenses. And that what it does is it creates a boundary in my mind that this is fixed. I have to move around, and I'm gonna try to make my environment, or I'm gonna try to find what's in my environment that would benefit the most with that lens, right? How can I tell stories through that perspective, and not if I'm adding like a zoom, I'm gonna be like, oh, do I want to do that at 24, or maybe it's better at 35? Oh no, actually maybe at 70. So it's it avoids having like tons of shots of the same thing at different focal length.
Yeah, that's something you and I talked about last time we got to speak. That notion of carrying maybe a single lens and really just letting it focus how you're approaching the scene and how you're approaching the moment, and keeping you from getting a little bit too lost in your gear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add something on those zoom lenses and those boundaries. If you're ever in a place and you're thinking, it's raining, I can't shoot, I don't have the right gear or whatever, I actually always carry at the front of my backpack, just at the bottom, I always carry a little plastic bag or a little plastic pouch. You can even take anything and cut a hole in it. And that way, if I'm in one of those moments, I'll put one of prime lens because I find that overall I feel more safe using a prime lens in the rain than a zoom. Although it's probably unfounded, but I'll put one of those prime lenses. I'll put my plastic bag in the camera in the plastic bag, and I'll go roam around and try to find different kind of shots.
What else do you have in your bag that you maybe, that's not just cameras and lenses? You mentioned the plastic bag and you had some of the cleaning cloths. Is there anything else that you usually have with you?
Yeah, so let's see. I'll show you. There's a cool thing on the hip belt that's actually a little pouch right there. So if I'm shooting at 50 millimeter, and that happened in Mexico, I was shooting at 50 millimeter, but there was a few shots I wanted a little wider. I'll actually pop one of the lenses right here, and that will allow me while I'm on the field to play with that and switch gear without having to open the back panel. Because, everyone asked me the question about safety. I try to be as non-extravagant as possible. I'll try not to open my bag in the middle of the streets to show everyone what's in it. So, and the bag is fairly, I would say, discreet. It looks like a hiker's bag. So that's a good point. But if I can have a lens on the side, that's really cool to switch. And then the other thing I'm going to have is always a little thing for my head, the plastic bag, and some hydration tabs, because when you're out there shooting on the field, that really, you don't want to get tired from shooting. And the last thing is I have a bunch of micro cloth, which I highly recommend, like just stuff them everywhere in your bag. You usually get them for free with some lenses or with filters. Just put a bunch of them in your backpack, because there's nothing worse than being on the field and having a wet t-shirt, not being able to wipe out the lens or anything. So reaching out for one of those will really help and keep your gear clean. I used to bring always one of those blowtorch, but I never use it. And I'm probably the worst person to ask. I usually I blow a little bit with my mouth, which I don't recommend to anyone to do. But when you have nothing else, And then I have a few tools in case I need to remove tripod heads or tripod, how do you call that, screws. That's super helpful. I've been on the field and I was trying with my nails, and I can tell you this was not an enjoyable experience. Then we've got a little toothbrush, some tea, more cloth, and anything for surviving in case, something goes wrong. But
I love the details. The details are great.
I know, the details are the most important. And at the bottom of the bag, we have a little, how do you call that, rain cover that pulls out and goes over the bag in case I want to shoot longer in the rain. And the ones that I mentioned at the beginning are going to be my capture clips from, Peak Design. And I just hold the camera there all the time. It keeps it secure, and I never had a problem, even riding a bike or hiking for hours. It always worked out. So that's pretty much those are the little details I have. And in terms of cables and how do you call that, chargers, I will say one thing that's helpful is to get one of those pouches. This one is Side by Side, is the name of the brand. But having those cables and the charger here allows you, when you get on location and you want to go, like I said, for an hour shoot in the city, or you're going up a volcano, you don't want to take all your chargers. You just take that out of the bag, put it in your hotel room, and when you come back in the evening, you want to compartmentalize stuff as much as possible so you can go out very light, and that makes it easy.
Another accessory, Pierre, that we got a question about is memory cards. How many do you carry with you? Do you have spares? How do you store them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a little box that I don't know where I put it, because I just unpacked another bag. And what happens is that I will carry about twice as much as what my camera can keep. So let's say I have 2 in each camera, or 2 in one camera. I'm gonna try to have at least 2 extras minimum, and that will depend on the length of the trip, right? So if I'm going on a day shoot, I don't really need memory card. Like I have 160 gig and 128 gig. That's way more than enough. But now we were in Tanzania. I would run through all those cards very quickly. So what I do is I will keep them in my backpack, and I will rotate so that I always have a backup of what I shot. That's kind of important. So take your memory card out of the day, push it aside, put a new one for the next day, and back up that small memory card that you already shot with. You don't want to have, at the end of the day, when you're coming home, you want to make sure you have redundancy in your footage. So I'll use a NAR box and a SSD hard drive if I don't have access to a laptop, just to back those up. And then you can format them once it's maybe on 2 different SSD, or on an SSD and a NAR box. You can format that card and recycle them.
Another accessory question for you, Pierre, related to filters. How often do you use filters on camera versus using what you have your presets in post?
Okay, so that's a great question. Those two, what you do in post and what you do before, are going to be completely different. My philosophy is whatever you can get right in camera, don't try to do it in post. It's going to take you more time than screwing on a polarizing filter. Trying to get like the right blues or like darkened blues and the reflection out of surfaces is a nightmare in post. So you just get one of your polarizing filter, you pop it on, and you turn it right. Now, you have to understand the limitations of polarizers. There's a bunch of videos around that. But I try to get those effects when necessary in camera all the time. And those don't run too expensive, and they're such an important piece of gear, especially if you're in an aquatic environment or there's a lot of reflection in the mountain, on the snow, stuff like that. I will say, there is other filters like mist filters, which give you a very dreamy kind of look with like kind of blown out highlights and very soft. Those, again, you can try to emulate in post, but why bother when you can just screw on a filter and get the photo right away, you know? That's so much easier. And the presets I will use in Lightroom, for example, after, will be for the overall look of the photo. And that's kind of a constant that I will have across the shoot, but some shots require a polarizer because we don't want the reflection, or will require that mist filter to get that dreamy portrait look. Oh, I'll add something. Sorry, Michaela. While we're on filters, I'll just give a trick to people, because filters can run you expensive, right? Especially if you have different sizes of threads. Just get adapters, which is step-down rings, meaning you buy the widest filter you can. It's going to be a little more expensive, but that's a 82 millimeter. And then I'm going to have 3 rings that go from 82 down to 67. So even on my 24 millimeter, it's going to fit. It's a little hack if you want to stay on budget with your filters.
Very good tip. Good one to end on this first section. So thank you for that very thorough walkthrough. That was very cool. Let's go to the next section and talk a little bit about what you do in the field.
Yeah,
sure,
and
let's go.
Pierre, we'd like to kind of dive into Pierre, we'd like to kind of dive into a couple of the lenses that you had talked about, just a little bit more in depth. And you know, which one would you like to start with?
Let's start with the one on the camera, the 1635.
Awesome. We have some video of you from your channel actually using that lens. Let's go and have a look at that video now.
I'm gonna go over there by the rock. Alex is gonna go shoot now. I got some shots I really like. Alex is a little far, that's okay. I'm gonna be a little closer. And then I really love that side also, but just because it's so visual for me, it's like immersive. I feel like I'm in full connection with the place. I don't know, it's weird, but it's beautiful. So yeah, let's try not to die and slip and fall in the waterfall. Some tips when you're shooting those waterfalls: first, your gear is gonna get wet. That's okay. Most of the gear is gonna survive. What I want to tell is try to shoot with a slightly slower shutter speed so you get some cool water movement, and really in faces the rest of the rocks that are not moving. And on top of that, if you have a polarizing filter, that will really help cut out the reflection from those spots right there. That's definitely the things you want to keep in mind when you shoot that kind of photos. And I need to find a way to get there, so we're gonna have to crawl under that rock. Anything for the photo. Woo, this is intense. Hope you're enjoying those adventures, guys. This is what photography is all about, having fun. Whoa. Alex photo in 3, 2, 1.
Clip from your trip to the Pacific Northwest. And before we start talking about that a little bit, I just want to remind our audience that we're here live with Pierre. Please submit your questions. We'd love to be getting your questions and answering your questions for Pierre. We'll be here with him for a while yet. And anything you want to ask, please feel free to drop it right into the chat on Alpha Universe, into the question box, and we'll get to as many as we can. And Pierre, I just want to talk a little bit about that clip. So there you were using the 1635 in the Pacific Northwest, and it was, the word that I really homed in on that you were talking about was, immersive. And talk to me about how you use that lens, why you use that lens in that situation.
Yeah, so that lens is actually one of those versatile. I've never been to that spot in my life, right? So I wasn't sure exactly how I would shoot it, and there was like water splashing everywhere. And so it's not a spot where you want to just chill and have your bag open and just go through lenses until you find the right one. So the zoom was super important. I was like, okay, what does it look at 16? What does it look at 35? How does it feel? And how can we make it? Again, my goal when storytelling is to bring you in those stories and to bring you to the location I'm in. And for that, whatever is wide can do those things, right? When you're shooting wide with a wide field of view, it kind of feels a little immersive, and you feel a little closer in a way to what's happening. If I shoot with a long lens, it's gonna feel like we're sniping, right? That we're looking from a distance in a way. But when you're shooting wide, it really feels like you're there, and you can put a little more elements. And if you find the right elements, like that water and the waterfall, that connect in a way towards your subject, that really helps bring your image and thus your story together. So that 1635 is something that I will use for that. Like if I'm not sure how I will tell the story, I will revert to that, and I will play a little bit around on a new spot and understand, okay, 16 is a little too wide, I'm gonna get too much and it's gonna lose the attention of the person, and then I can dial back it to 20 millimeter might be the right sweet spot. And in most cases, I don't need to shoot at 1.8, I don't need to shoot at 1.4. 2.8 is gonna be great in those conditions. Like as you could see on the waterfall, it was a little darker, and on top of that, we were doing a little long exposures, and to do that, we were actually cranking up the aperture. So you could have been using a 1635 f4 or f2.8 and have good results with that. I do prefer that GM because it's weather sealed, so in those conditions, it's a lot nicer. And I always try to work with that. It's important, again, to understand the environment you're in, observe it, and then understand what tool you can use to make your story, your vision come to life.
With that kind of wide angle zoom, and at 16, and when you're going for that big waterfall shot in particular, and maybe getting a little bit of that motion blur in it, you can get really up close with that, or you can back off a little bit and create just a whole different look to the scene, and just really kind of experiment a bit.
Yeah, and what was interesting on that spot, I was with my friend Alex, who shot some of those also at 16 from the bridge when I was down there, and then we switched before, like he was down by the waterfall on a different spot, and I was on the bridge with a 16. And what was interesting is that some of the shots that I took with him were not working at 16, right? Because I was like closer to the bridge, but at first I had him further from the bridge. So 16 was that little too wide. We're like, where is our subject? He got lost in the frame. So that's when I would go down and be 28 millimeters, 35. Okay, we're still getting the waterfall. We're still getting that flow. But now we can see our subject a little better. You could think I'm going to crop later. That's fine. But again, whatever you can get right in camera is going to be much, much, much easier to work with. And it's something that I just remind myself of. It's a lens that sometimes I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't shoot zooms anymore. And then I go back to my 16-35 and I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Like, it's just so, you could be on a market in Tanzania or on a waterfall or shooting street or in the desert, shooting like some action. You can do so much with that lens. It's just a great, great all-rounder. And I've shot a lot of Astro also at 2.8 with it through the years and was never really disappointed.
Yeah, that's really great insight.
Let's jump into a different lens now, Pierre. One that is not an all-arounder, but that you've used in a very interesting way recently in a video that caught our eye with street photography with the 14 millimeter GM. Shall we talk about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's more than... Yeah, I was so surprised. So everyone's like, too wide is not good for street photography, right? Most people are like, 35 is the holy grail, maybe 50 millimeter, but 35 is literally one of the standard when it comes to street photography. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting a little bored of the same frames. Either a little too compressed, like 85 or 50. I was like, I need to challenge myself. And so I went for the 14 millimeter, which I love in like adventure settings. I was like, let's try it for street photography. And that got really, really interesting because you can't rely, like, let's say you shoot with an 85. You can hide behind a pole. You can use some plans to like create a cool blurry background, foreground, etc., and like isolate your subjects much easily, which are stuff we talk about during workshop, that we work on. But then you come to a 14 millimeter and you're lost. You're like, wow, I can't hide anything. I can't use elements that much. I really have to work with the frame and understand what has to be in that frame, what cannot go in it. And it's just, honestly, it's a fun challenge. It's a surprisingly difficult one, especially depending on the city you're in. I won't hide it. Being in Chicago makes it a lot easier to shoot with a 14. We have tall buildings, we have like interesting like bridges and all that. If I'm in a small town, I think I will struggle a little more with the 14, but whenever you struggle, that's also when you come up with gems because you push yourself in a different way and you're like, I've never tried that. Let's try it. And suddenly it comes out great. So with the 14 on that.
Let's
you've got something for us?
Segment. Yeah, let's watch a segment from the video and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
Awesome. We'll go in some back alleys in a second and see what we can do there. All right, anyway, guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Would you actually get a 14 millimeter lens like that? Would you think you would be able to do something with it? Or you think it would be like too wide, impossible? Hopefully we get some good light poking through. Okay, let's see if we can get those on the wide angle. That's hilarious. I have the Chick-fil-A actually thing that's sharp behind Oh, this is good. We've got some light. Okay, we're gonna try a shot. We're gonna try again when they're crossing, but I'm gonna go with a different angle. Hey, this works out really nicely. I actually love those. Ooh, with the dog. Oh, I love that. Look at that light. This is so good. So good. Okay, I'm gonna try to shoot a little bit against the light there. Everyone keeps beeping me. It's like they haven't seen people in a long time. Oh, look at this guy running. This is cool. Okay, so 14mm is definitely the on the floor kind of lens. Ooh, so good.
Super cool shots. A couple of things I want to say. If people want to watch the whole thing, they should go to your channel. There are some additional cool shots there, including one where you run into a flock of pigeons. No pigeons were hurt in the making of those photos, I should say. And there's a lot more that you show from this little adventure with the 14mm. And the other thing I wanted to say is, please do not try this at home, especially the parts where you're shooting in the middle of the street. This is a professional doing that work. So, so how are you approaching something like that, something new like that? Because everyone knows that the 14mm GM is ultra sharp, is one of the best ultra wides in the market, and it's really awesome for astro and for landscape, but you took it out on the street. How do you experiment with lenses like that, and what makes you think about it in that way?
So whenever I'm like with such a wide lens, what I'm thinking about a lot is leading lines. How can I draw you into the image the easiest way possible? And how can I have something that's not too distracting? Because it's easy to have too much in frames. You know, we are usually, at least when I was a beginner, I remember thinking, I need a super wide lens to capture everything, you know. But then when you capture everything, you also capture nothing. And that's basically what your thinks when looks at the photo. So one of my favorite shots in that clip was actually that lady walking across with the dog, which is gonna end up in one of the collection that I'm releasing soon on of my photography. And I actually started playing with shooting super low to the ground and realized that with the bridge we had those leading lines, we had people crossing, and I could use either the sidewalks stripes that are on the middle of the road and the crossing, sorry, for pedestrians, to actually lead you a little bit in, or I could use the black asphalt to create negative space also for those shots. And if you shoot low enough, your subject are gonna pop out. They're gonna be on the background sky, on the sky background, or they might be on different backgrounds. Whether if you're shooting always like at arm chest, at chest height, sorry, it doesn't really work the same way. You know, you're not gonna have the same feels, which can be fun too, but when you're with something that different, you want to try something completely different too, you know, and see how it behaves, how the photo come out. And most importantly, with the 14, please don't be afraid to get close. I don't know if you noticed, but when the guy was like running with his flip-flops, I was very, very close to him. Yeah. It's one of those things where you want to have a busy city where no one cares that you're like a crazy person on the floor taking photos. Because in some environment, people might just stop for you and try to let you shoot. And you're like, no, actually, I want you to go through. Yeah. That happens a lot, actually, even in those cities. But this is a lens which will really kind of push me a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm going to be like, I don't know how that's going to work. I can't fall back on my old tricks in a way we can say, you know, with 85 or 50. So really got to work for this. And we've seen it with the terrible shots I took at the beginning, you know.
Well, you even took some portraits with it, which was another interesting scenario with the gentleman on the street, and those
Hmm.
turned into some iconic shots as well. So even portraiture, it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people's limitations are just like what they've heard versus what they've experienced, right? You've heard that portraits look better at 85. Yes, if you apply a certain standard of beauty, but if you're going for something different, if you're going for something immersive, use that 14 millimeter. Even in Tanzania, I was shooting like 16 millimeter portraits with hunter gatherers and that felt really nice, and it feels very present. It feels in your face, but sometimes you want that feeling. You don't want it to be a little nice and tidy up. You want it to be a little more rough and literally in your face. And that's why I love shooting wide.
Cool. Well,
That's
thanks
awesome,
for
Pierre.
sharing. That was very that was very cool and very educational.
Yeah, and the third lens I'd like to really look at is that the 50 millimeter f1.2 G Master that I know you've been using, and we actually have some video for another one of your videos on your channel where you use that in, I think it was Mexico. Let's take a look at that.
So I'm on the 50-1.2 right now because it's a lens I really like in the streets. If it's too tight at 85, it might be difficult in smaller cities or like towns, but 50 millimeter is that right spot in my opinion. Also, a quick tip: when I'm asking people, when I'm talking to them, sometimes you don't need to ask for a photo. The person actually wants you to take their photo. They kind of like show you and stuff. And that's when it can be interesting, like you gotta read body language. The person is uncomfortable, don't shoot it. Which way are we gonna go? We're gonna go that way and we're gonna circle around. See what there is. Oh, this looks cool, like that corner with the scholars. It's pretty fun. And okay, we can increase the aperture. No need to shoot at 1.4 or 1.2 here. Boom. By the way, fun fact, I had 3 batteries in my backpack and I have no clue how. They were all empty, and I always make sure they're not empty before I go on a trip, but I don't know how that happened, but it happened. So ooh, could be an interesting frame over there. It's like people walking and the bird. Boom. It's cool. What would be good if we had a surfer with the board on his head going through? That'd be kind of cool. So that frame's kind of empty right now, but I think we can make it better. Okay, let's see. This is the lights. That's kind of cool. We'll try to get that motorbike guy, the guy with the dog. Oh, that's like a little market. I think it's good we came before it's open. Oh, that's cool. Oh, I like that shot with the bike, is pretty cool. Let's try again. So I was hesitating between shooting now and at sunset. At sunset, we might be able to have more life, but I actually wanted it to be a little quiet, because if it's too much, it's too much. I don't know, did you guys see the kid? It's just crossing over there. Because we have like 50 megapixel, I can actually recrop later, so that's cool. You gotta think about what you have, like shoot with the gear you have.
That was a really cool clip. And before we talk about it for a minute, I just want to remind everybody that we're live with Pierre. If you have questions, please send them in through the chat, through Alpha Universe, through the question box. We'll get to as many as we can. But Pierre, I just want to talk about that segment a little bit and how you use that lens. One of the things that I really honed in on was you mentioned that you really like that focal length and that lens when you're shooting in a city. And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, 50 millimeter is that sweet spot between too tight and too wide in a way. 24 might be great, 35 still wide. 50 is gonna allow me to get kind of right to the point without needing to add too much in my frame. And if it's a busy background, if it's busy around me, it's gonna be very easy. And in the clip we saw two things. one of the shots I took around the beginning, I actually cropped it massively. It's an example of shooting prime. It's great, but there are times where you're like, okay, I can come back to that spot with a different lens, a longer lens, and that might work a little better. Now, just after that, when I was walking in the middle of that street with the vendors setting up, etc., just at the end, we haven't gotten to that part, I start asking people if I can take photos of them with that 50mm. And that 50mm really allowed me to take on-the-spot portraits without being restricted by a lens that's too long all the time during the shoot. I really didn't want to carry other gear. I was like, I'm going to go just 50mm, and I was able to get those portraits without being too intrusive on people. That's something. If you're shooting with 14mm portraits, you might have to warm up people a lot about being that close to their face, So 50mm, you're going to be a little further, but not too far where they can't hear you. And that really works well in terms of focal length. And also those 50s get you a really nice background blur. That one too is obviously insane. And I was able to layer different people, different scenes happening in the same frame, right? I might have my main subject and kids running in the background, or suddenly want to focus on the kids running in the background and blur out everything. That is something with those apertures 1.2 to 1.8 where you can really play without, even if you don't have like nighttime bokeh to add effects. It's something that I really enjoy, and 50mm has a little bit of compression, not too much, but just enough to bring those out. And honestly, this is not a light lens, but the trade-off for me is having incredible quality. It's so beautiful, sharp, and the autofocus is just insane. I don't think I ever missed a shot except from my own human errors on those.
Yeah, that's a really great point about the autofocus, because you're a traveling photographer. You go to a lot of places and you're in a lot of challenging environments, and kind of knowing that your camera and your lens are really going to get you a super sharp shot is, it's not just I hope it's sharp for you. It's got to be sharp. It's what you do to make a living.
Yeah, and when you're shooting between 1.8, 1.2, there is something that we forget, is that missing the right focus point means your photo is literally not usable. You can do whatever you want if you focused at the back of the head of someone at 1.2. It's not like you're shooting at f4. You can't recover that. You can't like fake it and be like, that's fine. When you're shooting that shallow, you really have to make sure the camera is going to get it right. And that's something I enjoy. I mean, the setup with the A1 and the 50 has never disappointed me. Even with the S3, it's always like right where it needs to be. And that's something that's pretty big for me. When you're changing environment, you're running around, that's something important,
Definitely.
Cool. Well, that was great. 3 lenses, 3 different perspectives, a little bit for everyone. So thank you so much. And I think we're going to move on to the next section and ask you absolutely anything. So everyone, get your questions in. So Pierre, the first question that was asked here that I will ask you, very broad, and you mentioned this in many of your videos. You said it a few times in the street video with a 14mm. This is why I invested in an A1, and we all know why. But the question that's being asked is, what camera are you using, and what are the key things to keep in mind while buying a full frame camera?
Okay, so that's a great question. The first thing is understanding what you're going to do with it, I think, is the most important. I get that question a lot. People give me, I have that much money. I'm like, it's not so much about the budget you have, it's what are you going to be doing with it, right? Sometimes it's more important to invest in that 51.2 or that 14mm than the top-notch camera. Maybe you're better off with the A7 III and that 14 than a camera that's going to cost you both combined. So depending on what you're going to shoot, you'll be going towards something that can shoot faster frames if you're doing action or wildlife and you need that autofocus, like A9, A1. But if you're going for something more versatile, something like a A7 III, A7 or 4 might be right up your alley. And the A7S III, I don't really mention it for photography usually, but it's a great photography camera also. You will have a drawback of 12 megapixel, but you will have low light that's unmatched by any other camera around here. So if you're trying to shoot as if it was daytime at night, that would be your camera. So defining first what you're going to shoot, what is your budget is important, but more than the budget, it's are you going to make a return on your investment through professional work? If you do, then you can think about maybe something that will go a longer way for you if you start actually making a living with it. You can amortize it a little better. If you're just keeping it amateur and you want to have fun with it, I think you should keep it simple and have fun with lenses even more than the camera body.
Okay, very good advice. Let's go to the next question here on the list. Would you pick the 135 1.8 GM versus the 70 to 200 GM? And if yes, why?
Oh, that's such a good question. It depends on the
situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So the 135 is actually, and if you watch the channel long enough, it's probably the one lens I actually was struggling to get a hand on, because I've never been used to shoot at 135, I've always been around 85 or with the 70-200, but when I'm at 70-200, I shoot at 70 or 200. I'm hardly ever in between. And so then 135 was throwing me off at first, but then when I looked back at the photo and what I was able to get, the compression and that shallow depth of field, it was like absolutely mesmerizing. So if I had to choose between those two, I would still go for my 70-200 to 8 personally, because I'm going to have more versatility than the 135 f1.8. But let's say I'm a wedding photographer, portrait photographer, and I shoot always the same type of shots that require that focal length that I want to use it for, then I'll probably keep the prime and not use the zoom.
Okay, very good. We touched a little bit on this, but another question is a little bit more detail on the filters. What filters do you have in detail, and what do you use them for?
Let's go back to the bag. Okay, polarizing filter is the first one we mentioned, always super important. Then I have ND, I think it's that one, ND16 polarized, that I use for video in super bright environment if I also need to cut out reflection. I don't recommend NDN polarized all the time if you're shooting wide. It just gets artifact when you're polarized in your videos. But ND16 polarized. And then I have usually a ND1000 with me, which it's like a romantic a thing with me where I carry it and never use it, except that one day where I need to use it and I'm like, I don't have it. So ND1000 allows you to do long exposures in daytime, for example, rivers, waterfalls, when it's like full daytime, or if you want to play in the streets. Actually, I should go do that again soon, where I do long exposure in the daytime just for fun, trying something different if you're always doing the same thing in your city. And then I have, which one is that one? Another polarizing filter. And I also have usually in hand a broken filter that I use for effects at night. There's a video on the channel. You can just type broken filter, Pierre. On YouTube, you'll find it. And it's great if you want to play with some lens effects. And the next one that I will add is a mist filter. I haven't actually made my choice yet for a mist filter, not too strong, but just to give a little softness and like glow into the photos.
That's really great. And Pierre, we got a question about high-speed burst. And do you use high-speed burst, and how often do you use it if you do?
Yeah, I use it. How often? Depends how long I want to call my photos for. I'm just joking. I use it a lot whenever I'm gonna be in environments like we saw on the 14 for example, a video where I was in the street. What happened is that when you're shooting with roads and there's a bunch of people running across, you want to make sure that you don't miss the right moment. And if you're run and gun and you're like moving all the time, it can be hard to know exactly when to shoot that one shot, right? So what I'll do is I'll shoot in single shot most of the time if I know what I'm exactly looking for. And if I'm aware that there might be a chance that it's going to be too fast for me, I'll move to high speed burst. And that will give me more to choose from, which is great. And if I'm underwater, all the time high speed burst, because there's so many shots that I miss if I shoot with just one lens.
Another question that we have here, Pierre, from the chat. When shooting subjects in movement, it's really hard to get the right focus, even if you are in continuous autofocus. Do you have any advice for our friend?
Yeah, if you're in there's two modes that I like to use when it comes to focus. It's going to be in the focus area. It's going to be the single point focus, and I'm going to move it around and maybe track my subject with my camera if I know the person is not going to move out of the frame or do like some crazy movements. And I know that I need to shoot the subject no matter what my background is. That's something I'll use. Or I'm actually going to use in tracking mode. So if you go under, there is a focus area that is called up. One sec. Here we go. I'll let you know what it's called, guys. It's called tracking. And then I'll go in tracking spot or tracking wide if the subject suddenly comes in the frame and I need the camera to lock onto it. I use 90% of the time. I don't use tracking. The only reason is I know exactly why I want to focus in most of my shots, so I don't need to track a subject. Most of the time, I don't have a subject to track. Whenever I do that. And if it gets super tricky and you're confused, all your shots are blurry, even with tracking, you don't know what's happening, but you know your subject will, for example, it's a skater and he will come back several times in the same spot, make sure you manual focus to the spot where your subject will be, and then you take your photo, your burst, while your subject is passing that point. That can really save you. And having focus peaking and the highlights where your focus is really works well on those cameras.
That's great. And Pierre, we got a question, and this one I think is going to be tough to answer. It's kind of like the that question. I have $200 and I want a full frame camera and the best lens. What should I get? But if you were traveling on a trip and you could only bring one lens, what would be your one lens?
I'll go for the 16-35. I was thinking maybe 24-70, but it's too big for that one lens setup. It's I love that lens, but I wouldn't take it. The 16-35-8 would be the perfect all-rounder. I can get those kind of portraits at 35. I'll be able to get environmental shot at 24 and 16. I can shoot some astro if I want, get immersive shots, and a little bit pull back. And if I'm on the A1, the R4, the R3, I can crop in also later. I'll use the APS-C mode. I'll lose a little bit on quality, but who needs 42 megapixels on every single shot? You can also use, let's say you get 20 megapixel or 18, but then suddenly you have a 50 millimeter or 60 millimeter, and that's how versatile you can be.
Excellent.
Great answers all around, Pierre. We'll have one final question coming from Wendell. You have talked about different kinds of photography. What is your favorite thing to shoot and why?
Favorite thing. It's a little difficult to answer. There is not one favorite. It's I think it's the perfect. I'll set it up like that. The perfect photo trip has a mix of adventurous shot, like shooting on the water, shooting in waterfalls, and a little bit of that interaction with people, whether it be in the desert with people who live there or whether it be in the streets. I like to combine like the adventure part and being in places and just shooting the action happening or nature, and also having always that human connection whenever I can. I think that's for me is the perfect combo.
Well, great answer. Thank you so much for coming on today. You have taught us so much. Thanks for walking us through all of that gear and answering all these questions. I don't know how you do it, but you do it so well. So we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for kicking us off with this What's in My Bag Live. We're really excited that we had this opportunity to have you on.
Yeah,
well,
has
thanks
really been
everyone
great,
for
Pierre.
watching, and Michaela and Christopher, thank you so much for being great hosts with me.
Our pleasure. We will definitely see you again, I'm sure, at one of our future events. Okay, Chris, that was a marathon.
That was a great session.
It was really good. It was fascinating to see how Pierre thinks, and I know that we're gonna do a bunch more of these, and it's gonna be really fun to watch the different creators that we're gonna have on and see how they differ in their approach to gear. So much more to come.
Yeah, and for viewers out there, there's plenty more What's in My Bag content at alphauniverse.com. And don't forget to check out Pierre's YouTube channel if you're not already subscribed there, as well as the Alpha Universe YouTube channel, where you can see a lot of other content.
Yeah, and subscribe to our channel so you can get notified when we have the future What's in My Bag lives and all the different new content coming out every week. So there's a lot more to see. And for next week, we have none other than Rachel Jones-Ross. We're going to see what's in her bag, take a peek at her gear, and learn a little bit more about her shooting philosophy, the way we did Pierre's today. So please don't miss out on that. We have other programs, as you know, right now on the screen, you can see Alpha Female Plus is one of the programs on Alpha Universe. We have workshops every month, so sign up for that as well and take a peek. And a lot more content, so stay with us, learn with us, enjoy all this great photography and filmmaking, and we will see you again next week with Rachel Jones-Ross and many more events to come in the future.
See you then.